Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. When I found myself going through a difficult time a few years ago, I turned to self-improvement books to work on myself and my relationships. After months of reading every day and applying the lessons I learned, I was able to go from grumpy to grateful. And it was this journey that inspired me to write my book, Everyday Lessons Every Day. The power of personal development changed me, and I believe it can change the world. To that end, I invite everyday people to share their everyday lessons and how those lessons are changing their lives for the better. This week, I sat down with Tracy Oswald, whose life was literally changed by an immersive theater experience. Now, if you're like me, you may not be entirely sure what that means, but that's okay for two reasons. One, Tracy will explain what an immersive theater experience is, and two, you don't have to have this same experience to be the recipient of the wisdom that Tracy received from her moment of clarity. This is a unique episode in that Tracy's everyday lesson is one that didn't come from a self-improvement book and isn't talked about all that often. But it should be because this lesson is vitally important for us to hear and discuss. And I can tell you that if you're a female listener, it's likely that you're going to be really fired up over the next 30 minutes or so. And if you're a male, you may come away from this episode with a greater understanding of the opposite gender and the challenges they face. This is episode 44. The world is waiting for you to show up with Tracy Oswald. Good morning, Tracy. How are you?
Good morning, David. I am great.
Yes. Have you had your coffee today?
I have it. The listeners can't see this, but I'm holding up my coffee cup right now. It's my cup number 2.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on my podcast. I've been watching your podcast and listening to some of the stuff you've been putting out a lot of, and I know we're in for something good today. So not just your expectations too high or my expectations, but so will you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. So I love this question because I always want to go right to this is what I do for a living, right? We've been conditioned to do that. For me, I'm a very curious person. So, and how I let that curiosity play out is in a lot of different ways. You know, my 9 to 5, if you will. I run sales learning and development for the USA Today network, Gannett. Right. So, and you and I have a history there that we can get into too, because we were kind of like peers and coworkers a little bit around that,
Yeah, kind of
ish,
like that.
right? Like
Yeah.
we, you know, and it was a great journey to get where I am now. I am also a coach and a speaker, so I do a lot of speaking, especially for women's groups, and I'm a fellow podcaster. Man, I never met a microphone I didn't like, so. So, I'm all of those things, and what fuels me is curiosity.
So your own curiosity or other people's curiosity?
Yeah, so my own, because I'm selfish, and I like to find out all of the things. But what my curiosity lets me do is tap into other people's curiosity, help them activate it, get interested in what they're interested, and I think that's how we grow as humans, and how we help the world grow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let's just get right to it. I have been
Yes.
waiting for weeks for your everyday lesson. So tell us what it is that you have brought to share.
So my everyday lesson is simple and also big. It says, "The world is waiting for you to show up."
The world is waiting for you to show up.
Yeah.
Now, that's not something I've heard before. I've not read that. Is that a Tracy Oswald
Yeah.
original?
I don't know if I co-opted it from somewhere. I don't remember if I did, but where I learned it was I learned it many times over and over in the last, I don't know, 9 or 10 years. And it started, and we've had this conversation, David, around a trip to an immersive theater um, show in New York City back in 2012. And that's where that's the moment that sparked my transformation as a human, um, and allowed me to see and to feel viscerally, oh, there's so much more to this that I'm not allowing, and the world is really waiting for me to start showing up.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First of
Yes.
all, the fact that you had a life-changing moment, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Walk us through it.
Yeah.
Some people don't even know what immersive
Yeah.
theater is. So walk us
Sure.
through what happened.
So way back in 2012, which feels like an eternity ago, right?
It does, yes.
And it was only 9 years ago, and, I was working in New York City for Reach Local, right? Which is we met several years after that, and, had a bunch of friends, and we would often go out on Thursday nights, right? Like, "Hey, let's check out this new bar or this new restaurant or this new cool art thing," and it was my turn to pick the thing that Thursday. And I went online, of course, looked at all of the stuff, and I found this experience. I really didn't know what it was. It sounded cool. I thought we were gonna be walking around with our cocktails, looking at, like, artists playing out scenes and talking about it and, like, having this super cultured, August New York City evening, and I could not have been more wrong. The production name, is Sleep No More. It's still running, obviously not now because of COVID, um, it's called Sleep No More, and it's what they call immersive theater. And for those of you who don't know what immersive theater is, there are lots of different ranges of immersive theater, but very broadly, immersive theater is a play that you're a part of.
Mhm.
And there's lots of different ways you can be part of it. Inside Sleep No More is set in a really big warehouse in Chelsea, and it's got 5 floors, over 100 rooms. The story of Sleep No More is largely the story of Macbeth, and it's got lots of other layers of stories that weave throughout it. It's got Hitchcock's Rebecca, or Du Maurier's Rebecca, actually, but with Hitchcock intonations. It's got the Paisley Witch Trials of 1696. It's got the story of Queen Anne and King James of Scotland, and it's all woven together in this dreamlike intensity. And you experience the play or the story by walking around with a mask on for 3 hours, and you can't talk. So let's just start there. What was interesting to me the first time I went, and I hear it every single time that I go, and I've gone 49 times.
Oh my
So you can
gosh.
say it's kind of a lifestyle for me at this point. Um, People are so when people are confronted with the fact that they have to be quiet for 3 hours and they have to wear a mask the whole time, they're much more worried about being quiet than they are wearing a mask for 3 hours, which makes me think that I have a really boring life compared to all these people, right? What I learned though, David, was, not being able to talk and having a mask on as I came upon these actors acting out scenes without dialogue, all through dance, through music, through interaction. I was invited in to take part of that. And when you are 3 feet from someone who is expressing as Lady Macbeth or Lady Macduff or one of the three witches in Macbeth, and they're inviting you into their space, there's this safety you feel when you have a mask on versus when you're confronted without a mask. And what it taught me was that I was, in fact, wearing this mask in my life. I was wearing this, I call it the armor of excellence, which I feel like covered my whole, like, we're taught, from very early on, you have to be really great in this world to succeed. And especially working in New York City, having armor on, I felt was necessary to protect me from all of the things, right? Real and imagined. And what I learned over time and going back to this show, it almost became my playground, um, my laboratory, the way I would start to unravel that mask, that armor, and allow me to show up in the world truly fully as myself. And I know that sounds super esoteric and way out there, but this is a real thing that happened for me. It really taught me that. And the more I showed up, David, the more I showed up and got brave and started doing things in real life that I allowed myself to do inside the McKittrick, like connect with people emotionally, run after people up the stairs that really interested me, play, like as an adult, play inside this space. I got braver in real life and I started opening doors and I started saying my truth. I was still afraid, but I had evidence that bad things didn't always happen, because I was inside Sleep No More, inside the McKittrick hotel doing this. It gave me bravery that I didn't have before. And it was the transformation I've had in the last 10 years has been incredible since I've allowed myself to sort of take off that mask and that armor of excellence, and instead of trying harder to do things, trying softer to do things. My career took off, my life took off, avenues opened that were I never even knew before, and it all stemmed from that initial transformational experience inside this immersive theater show.
Can you share a real example of something that happened outside the theater because of something that happened
Yeah,
inside the theater?
totally. So I lots of things. I'll start with moving to Texas. So I grew up in New York my whole life. My husband and I raised our kids there. There was an opportunity back in 2013 after I'd been to the show that said, "Hey, we want you to, come down to Texas and do this, have this role, with the company I was at." I never would have um, considered that before. Like that was a door that was shut to me.
Moving in general or moving to Texas or
Moving in jet, like just leaving New York for
okay.
Texas, right? But so that was a physical thing. The bigger thing for me, David, though, was my relationships with people, my team, my family. There was this binary way I approached my work and my leadership in my life. And so I thought that, or I was raised to think that um, going to work, I had to put on this one persona, right? That was tough, that got things done, that I didn't allow my nurturing side to come through back then. And I'm a woman. I'm also a mother. I'm a wife. There's masculine energy, there's feminine energy. I adopted a lot of masculine energy in my career up until then. And I thought that was the way to do it because I came up through very male dominated industries and my leaders were men. And I saw how they led, and I thought that's the way I had to do it. In fact, there were books, but I remember reading a book way back when. It was called, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, which sounds so preposterous, right? And you're smiling, right? It sounds crazy, like you wouldn't have a book now about that, but that was like a leadership book back then because it assumed that I had to act as the gender I was, but my brain had to be like a man's brain, and my actions, therefore, my actions had to be like a man's actions. And I didn't when that was the only way of being as a leader available to me, I didn't have the deep connection and relationships to my team and to the people in my company because I wasn't allowing that to come through. And so it was
I
very one
understand.
dimensional. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I learned to have deeper connections inside Sleep No More, inside what's called the McKittrick Hotel, which is the fictional hotel that this show is based on. Having the experiences where I get whisked away from one room into a secret room and get told a story, and someone holds my hand while they're looking into my eyes. It unlocked something in me that said, "Oh, it's okay to feel feelings. In fact, it's not just okay, it's necessary for your evolution as a human. We have feelings so we can feel them, and it's okay to bring them out in all areas of your life." And I learned that through going to this immersive show over time. And after the first night that I went, it was August of 2012, I'll never forget. It ended, we came back out into the speakeasy, which was where we started, and I thought, "I don't know what just happened to me, but I have to do this again." That's how great it felt.
I think this is unbelievable. So many times people have these aha moments after a book or a movie or even a song sometimes can really really inspire you to change your day or change a moment.
Yeah,
But this is the first time I've heard about, an immersive theater story changing a person's life. So that is super cool.
yeah.
So you go to Texas
Mhm.
and you're more open.
Yep.
Is it fair to say you're embracing your feminine energy now and bringing
So
that to work? Am I adequately understanding what happened?
so yeah, here's how I think about it. It wasn't simply slash only that I was embracing my feminine energy. There were thoughts that I had as a human where I thought I needed permission to not just have the thoughts, but talk about it. Like, at work, and I'm sure listeners who are listening right now can totally relate. You're in a meeting leaders are saying words, right, that you don't agree with, where you think that if we go down this road, it's gonna be horribly wrong. People are gonna be upset, and you have an opinion about this, but you're too afraid. You don't think you have the right, air quotes, to say that. And what I learned inside the hotel, inside the Sleep No More, was that I, in fact, had complete agency in my life. And agency is a really, really big theme and component of immersive theater. How much agency is the production company or the writer going to give the audience inside any kind of immersive experience? Are they going to have full agency where they can make every decision? Are they going to have limited agency where we're going to give them 3 decisions they can make, right, and ways they can act? And I believe that I had super limited agency in my life. I didn't realize that full complete agency meant I could make and own any decision I wanted to. Now, yes, there were consequences for making and owning decisions, right? You had to deal with both good and bad consequences, but I had permission and ability to make choices about how I showed up, and the world wanted me to show up. That's what I learned. The world wants me to show up. And inside my career, the more I started showing up and voicing opinions when I thought something was good or something was not good, or I had a really big idea. Case in point, I had a really big idea. I pitched it to the CEO back a few years ago. And the idea was around the growth lab. And I did a stint for about 2 years, traveling all over the country, speaking at events, had a podcast under the USA Today label. Out of an idea that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the courage or thought it was my place to speak that idea. But because I did, I got to experience this great thing, and so did all of the people that attended the events and listened to the podcast, and it made such a difference in the lives and work of local business owners all over the country, because I understood that I had complete agency in this world.
Let me ask you this. It seems to me like you are voicing some really important things that I believe women want and need to hear.
Yeah.
I've never really felt like I had any limited agency where I worked.
Mm.
Like, I'll say and do whatever I want. Do you think that's the difference of being raised as a man versus a woman?
It's hard to like. I don't, and I love that you bring this up, because it's hard knowing how you feel as a man, right? And I think
Hmm.
there are layers of this, David. I think there are men who also feel limited agency too. Like, it's the beliefs that we grew up with, but women particularly, because for millennia we have not had rights, right? It was only, what, 1920, we got 100 years ago, that we got the right to vote, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about how long we've been alive as a species, 100.
Women are really just coming into their freedom
Exactly.
just now.
And that's so true. And there's so much, there's this hangover of beliefs, right? Because you can say logically, as a man, as a woman, hey, I believe that women are equal, but the evidence has not caught up yet because of the gender pay gap, right? Because of women in leadership positions, because of, and that's just in this country. When you look at all around the world, where women are not allowed to, drive, or women are, not allowed to work or go to school in certain countries, women are still suffering from second sex syndrome. There's emotional, like I call it, the emotional hangover of that. There's beliefs that we have to interrogate as men and as women about what's possible for women. And that's why I like to talk about it all the time, because if we don't talk about it and bring it to light over and over and over, we run the risk of not evolving fast enough for, our daughters to, and I know you have a daughter, I have daughters that are older. Your daughter is just in her teens, right?
Yes.
And I know you want that for her. You want her to feel like she has this incredible, like the world is her landscape and she is like the artist, to create whatever she wants. But there are still lots of biases and this, belief hangovers about a woman's place or a woman's ability.
Well, I am so grateful that you are standing up for women everywhere and you are saying a lot of the things that they need to hear. So that is really special of you, Tracy.
Thank you.
It's
Look,
you showing up, right? Is
it
that
exactly. That's exactly it. I would never, like, I have the chills. I would never, like, before I had this transformation, doing the show I'm doing, which people have feelings about my podcast. People and when I speak, like,
well,
I
let's talk
get
a little bit about that. What is it you speak about? What's your podcast about? And how
so
does that relate back to you showing up?
yeah, so my podcast is called Defending Lady Macbeth. And I say it's the podcast for every woman who is ever told you're too loud, you're too much, or too ambitious. Because women still deal with this in the workplace and in life. Being told, take a seat, you're too ambitious, pipe down, say that, be nice, right? When, as compared to male counterparts, males are not told these things in this way. And what's really interesting is that my transformation and what I learned inside Sleep No More, inside and I've been to lots of other immersive experiences since then, because now, like, my big value, curiosity, I like to explore a lot of new and different things. But Sleep No More, looking at the characters in Sleep No More, particularly Lady Macbeth, and the more I spent time with her as a character inside the McKittrick Hotel, it forced me to research and, go back and look at things and read more Shakespeare and understand what life was like for women back when that play was written, right? And what I came to understand was that back then, to write a woman having power and agency was so taboo. You couldn't do it unless you made her so horrible and so fiend-like and such a villain that people would say, "Oh, it's because she thought she had this right to do these things, um, everything went horribly wrong and everyone died. See what happens when women think they have power and try to exercise it." And you can go
That's
back and
awful.
it
That
it
is
it is,
really
but
awful.
but but go back and look at all of historically, and even now, even in the last, 20 years, look at movies, right? And think about women characters. It's getting better, David. I'm not saying we haven't made progress, and I'm thankful for the progress we've made. But women were either the love interest in movies, and the only time they talked about men and relationships. They were not the central character, unless it was connected to the love interest of a man or they were this horrible villain. Now, I'm not saying that unilaterally is true anymore. It's getting better. But throughout history, throughout the only way women could be written and could be elevated was as a horrible person. And it was through that work that I kept having this thought, no one is defending women back then. How can I defend, like, this thought of having to take a stand and defend kept running through my mind. And then this idea, started bubbling up, how can I defend Lady Macbeth? How can I give her a voice that, a little bit of revisionist history, if you will. What if she was this really powerful woman, a really smart woman, and there was something that needed to be done and her husband didn't have the agency and courage to do it, but she did. And how would the story be different if it was a man that killed the king? That would be normal because that's just war. That happens all the time. But because it was a woman's idea, it was like, how could I help tell that story in a way that would be helpful to women? And it just unlocked this whole floodgate of researching and going down lots of rabbit holes, which were thoroughly enjoyable. But I came out the other side that I wanted to talk about and hold up Lady Macbeth as this unlikely hero, if you will, and very provocative, and that's intentional to get people to sit up and take notice. Like, what is she talking about? How can you defend Lady Macbeth? Right? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can and why it's important.
And do you translate those ideas into present time? Do you talk about women of today and how
Yeah.
they're viewed as villains, but they're just not doing anything different than a man would
Yeah,
do?
absolutely. So my show, I do solo shows where I go deep into history, talk about women in the past, recent past, and back in the Middle Ages, and then pull that forward through the lens of today. Because what we see a lot today is, you hear people talking about women. She's too fat, she's too skinny, she's a bitch, she's a pushover, she's too aggressive. All of these labels that get put on women that are elevated in places of power. When you look back and you look at, the 15th, 16th, 17th century, when women were in fact being killed, tortured, and burned at the stake for being, quote, witches, they were saying the same thing back then about women. She's too pious, she's not pious enough. She's too pretty, she's too ugly. She knows too much. When women, when you think about midwives and herbalists back in the day, those were the ones that were targeted, right? Because they had knowledge and power, and they stood too visibly in their power, and it made men uncomfortable. And so they had to be stopped and silenced. And so they were tortured and killed. And
Yeah, but what you just described practically still happens today.
yes,
They still make men uncomfortable.
yes. And women are, maybe they're not killed, actually killed, but,
They're pushed out of careers and
pushed out. Their character is assassinated. When we see a woman in power, the first thing we look at is, what does she look like and how does she sound? How does her voice sound? And what is she wearing? Right? As
oh my
opposed to a
gosh.
man. It's right. But it's all true. And I see your face, and I wish everyone you could see David's face right now. It's like, oh my gosh. And he's like rolling his eyes because it's so true, right? It's like, you can't unsee this when you start to see the parallels of, 400-500 years ago, how women were viewed and treated to today. And yes, David, I'm not saying, and for everyone listening, we've made tremendous progress. It is wonderful. It is not enough. And I want it to be more. And I can't not talk about it.
Awesome. So let's tie this all back to your everyday lesson.
Yeah.
Okay. The world is waiting for you to show up. Tell everyone what you want that to mean for them. What's the takeaway?
The takeaway is, even though you are afraid to do the thing, like the fear is never going to go away until after you do the thing. People are waiting for this thing called confidence. People are waiting for this thing called courage. Guess what? The courage doesn't come until the other side of the action, until you're done taking the action. And sometimes not even then. Sometimes you have to keep doing it over and over to develop that courage and confidence muscle. But the world is waiting for you to step fully into the thing that you are here to do, because it will affect so many people and have effects that you will never know on people. And that's what I think about. The work that we're doing today, the conversation we're having today, David, is going to affect someone that you and I will never hear or learn about. That's the magic.
Now you've given me the goosebumps.
But if we didn't show up here at 8 a.m., Central Time on this morning, we're showing up to the world with this conversation, and it will change people's lives because we decided to do this. And if we hadn't decided to do this, the world would stay the same on this topic for the people that might have resonated with this work. So the world's just waiting for you to show up. If you're waiting for the courage to do it, you're going to be waiting a long time, because you're never going to feel fully ready.
Tracy, I knew you were going to be brilliant. I really did. But you've got me at a loss for words, because I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, this is part of why I get up early, why I take the time to invite guests, why I will sit and edit this for another hour, tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like some people are watching TV or reading the newspaper or having a cup of coffee before work. I'm interviewing people and editing so that I can put out an episode every week. And sometimes, Tracy, I really wonder, why the hell do I do that? Do you feel that way sometimes?
Yes. And
But no, you have really stated to me something that I needed to hear. And I tell people all the time, selfishly, sometimes I just do the podcast for me. So I can talk to awesome, amazing people and have moments like this. But I hope you're right. I hope someone out there listening is also getting the goosebumps and realizing that thing that they've always wanted to do it's time. It's
Yeah.
time to pull the trigger on it. It's time to show up. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that you're not going to stop being afraid until you do it.
That's
This
it.
is brilliant stuff, girl. Brilliant.
It's so
Whew.
fun talking to you, and you're right, that's why you do what you do. You are showing up every day in, day out, week in, week out, so that people can have the experience of you showing up in the world and what that does for them and what that unlocks in them. And I think when we remember that, yes, I'm selfishly a lot of times doing it for me because it feels really good to get to talk to good people. It feels really good to get to be on this show with you. And so, yes, I love the experience of it, but know that yes, someone out there, even if it's one person, this conversation will change someone's life.
I hope you're right. I really do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if we can keep going down this path because it's just the awesomeness in this room just feels like it's off the chart. So, will you please tell listeners how they can stay in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. So the best way to stay in touch with me is LinkedIn. That's the platform I live on. I love it. You can, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will accept your connection request. You can DM me if you want to talk more about and find out more about the show. I post all the time about it there. So that's the best platform to get me on.
And the name of your podcast, once again, is?
Defending Lady Macbeth.
And I assume it's just available
Everywhere.
wherever.
Yeah,
Okay.
Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, you name it. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with me this
Yeah.
morning. This was an absolute blast, and I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you back, David. Thanks so much.
Wow. That was an episode. Tracy literally rendered me speechless at one point. I don't know if the silence made you uncomfortable or if it reveals that I'm not all that great a podcast host or what, but she clearly has a wonderful message, especially for women, but also one that men need to hear. Truth is, I needed to hear it. I needed to hear it because my wife had an experience that is really in line with Tracy's story, and it's one I never truly grasped until now. You see, she was an insurance adjuster for over a decade. She got into that line of work so that she could help people. And when customer service scores were the measurement by which employees were judged, Emily got 5 out of 5 stars because she's caring and nurturing and she took care of her clients' needs. But when management changed and started looking at dollars instead of customer happiness, Emily suddenly found herself on a performance plan. Because when you're trying to save money, you can't pay for an extra day on the rental car or the OEM part instead of the cheap aftermarket garbage that is so often used in a car repair. Her bosses actually sat her down and suggested that she might be too nice to do her job. I'm sorry, what? Shouldn't a person who is helping their client recover from a car accident be nice? Unfortunately, that drove Emily out of that very male-dominated industry. Fortunately, it drove her into a teaching career where her nurturing spirit is now a wonderful asset that she gets to share with kids. I always thought of that statement, "You're too nice for insurance," as like a funny anecdote that finally got her out of a toxic career and into teaching. But now I realize that she was being marginalized, and likely because she was a woman. Honey, I'm sorry I never fully understood the gravity of that moment, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm not sorry that it got you into teaching, though, because teaching is where you show up, and I'm very proud of you for that. To my female listeners, this week I challenge you to write "show up" on your wrists and do as Tracy suggests. Be you, be loud, be your true self, and don't be afraid to speak your mind, share your opinions, and stand up for what you believe. Men, that's good advice for you too, but I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you not to show up, but rather to help the women in your life show up. Be an advocate for women and show them the same respect you show other men. They deserve nothing less. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson by using the hashtag #EverydayLessonsEveryday in your social media posts or by reaching out to me personally at everydaylessonseveryday.com. You can also purchase my book while you're there or learn about hiring me to speak about personal development at your upcoming event. If you like the stories brought to you by Everyday Lessons Every Day, please consider writing a review. And also, please share this podcast with your friends. Let's see if together we can make the world a better place. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.